introduce. So welcome to Sharp Again's webinar on what is homeopathy. So before we begin, a quick note. The information shared today is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. Please consult a licensed medical professional for any health concerns. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Susanne Saltzman. Dr. Susanne Saltzman is the owner of Hartsdale Homeopathy, has over 25 years of clinical family practice treating acute and chronic illness in children and adults. Her emphasis is on homeopathic and functional medicine to decrease dependency on pharmaceutical drugs. She's also a member of the Sharp Again Medical Advisory Board. Welcome and thank you for joining us, Dr. Saltzman.
Hello, everyone. Sorry about that, the technological problem I had at the beginning. Anyway, so today I'm just going to give you an overview of homeopathy, the history of homeopathy, some of the scientific evidence behind homeopathy, etc. And then we'll take, questions afterwards. In the future, I'll be doing another webinar on how I use homeopathy as well as functional medicine and other tools to treat cognitive impairment and dementia. Today, I'm just going to focus on homeopathic medicine because a lot of people really don't know much about it. So homeopathy, the Latin root is homeos, meaning similar, and pathy, pathology, which I'll explain later. You can see my slides, right? Okay, good. So the system of medicine, a system of homeopathic medicine was actually originated with Samuel Hahnemann. Christian Frederick Samuel Hahnemann was a physician that was born in 1755 in Germany. He was a brilliant physician, a chemist, a linguist, a historian of medicine and scientific revolutionary who spoke 11 languages and was teaching Latin and German by the age of 12. By 1790, at the age of 35, Hahnemann had grown so dissatisfied with medical practices at that time that he quit practicing medicine and turned to translating medical journals for a living. The state of medicine in those days consisted of, this was in the 18th and early 19th century, consisted of leeching, use of toxic substances like mercury and arsenicum to purge the body of evil spirits and bloodletting. And Hahnemann saw the ineffectiveness and harm in these techniques, and he became an outspoken proponent of natural healing via proper diet and cleanliness, which is pretty amazing when you consider that was about 80 years before Pasteur's germ theory was discovered. This was called, quote, the Hahnemann method. This was even before he discovered this system of homeopathy. And this is just a picture of Hahnemann in those days. So while translating the treatise on Materia Medica, which was a medical book at the time by Dr. Cullen, in 1790, Hahnemann read about the toxicology of Peruvian bark or cinchona, from which quinine was derived. So quinine was derived from Peruvian or cinchona bark. It was used to treat malaria at the time. And he observed that the symptoms of Peruvian bark poisoning were similar to the symptoms of malaria for which quinine was used as a medicine. So the same substance which was used in high doses and caused a certain set of symptoms was the same substance that was used to cure those symptoms. And it occurred to him that this similarity might not be coincidental, but rather the very basis of the medicine's curative power. And that'll become more clear as I continue. Everyone can see the full slide, right? I think I just have to push over everyone to the side so I can see it. Okay, I got it there. Okay. So hang on, let me get it. So what he decided to do is he actually started to take cinchona or quinine himself, okay? And he noted the results, and I'm going to read it to you because this is very important. He said, I took several days as an experiment 4 drams of good china twice daily. My feet and fingertips at first became cold. I became languid and drowsy. Then my heart began to palpitate, and intolerable anxiety and trembling, prostration in all the limbs, then pulsation in the head, redness of the cheeks, thirst briefly, all the symptoms usually associated with intermittent fever or malaria appeared in succession, yet without the actual rigor or fever. To sum up, all those symptoms, which to me are typical of intermittent fever, as the stupefaction of the senses, a kind of rigidity of the joints, but above all, the numb, disagreeable sensation which seems to have its seat in the periosteum over all the bones of the body, all made their appearance. This paroxysm lasted 2 to 3 hours every time and reoccurred when I repeated the dose and not otherwise. I discontinued the medicine and I was once more in good health. So the medicine that is used to treat malaria, when he took it in a large dose, actually created symptoms of malaria, not the actual disease itself, but the symptoms itself. And this was known as Hahnemann's first proving or experiment. This is a picture of the plant, cinchona bark, from which quinine was derived. And Hippocrates actually had come up with the philosophy that which may poison may also heal. This is considered the first law of homeopathy, like cures like, or the law of similars, similia, similibus, curantur in Latin. The same remedy which causes a set of symptoms in a healthy person in large doses will cure those same symptoms in a sick person when given in a very tiny dose. So let me give you an example. What happens when you cut up an onion? Your eyes will burn, they may tear, your nose may run. If I have someone with allergies with those exact symptoms and give them diluted onion, which the remedy is allium cepa, it can cure them if it's matching those set of symptoms. It will resolve those allergy symptoms. This is very different from allopathy, which is conventional medicine, pharmaceutical medicine, where you're using allo meaning other or pathy meaning pathology. So for example, if I'm having an allergic reaction, which has to do with a lot of histamine being released, I will use an antihistamine or prescribe an antihistamine, which will stop that histamine reaction. So for example, if someone has a cough, they will take an antitussine or a medicine to stop the cough, okay? Whereas, so in allopathy, we will use drugs to suppress symptoms. In homeopathy, we're actually using substances or remedies that stimulate the body's immune system to overcome the problem. And this is one of the biggest differences, which will become more clear as we go along. So in homeopathy, we look at the totality of symptoms. We're not just treating diseases, we're treating people with diseases. So the total outwardly reflected picture or signs and symptoms of a disease or a disease state is what we're looking at. Every organism responds differently to either a disease agent or an internal or external stress. It is this unique individual symptom picture of the disease state that the homeopath seeks to understand. So let's take otitis media. I can have 2 children or 3 children with otitis media, which is basically an ear infection of the middle ear, and I may end up giving them 2 different remedies, okay? Because how the child presents with that ear infection is what's key. And so one child in my office may be with the same looking ear infection, may be clingy and whiny. He may be clinging to the mother. The mother tells me that when she takes the child outside, the ear is better, the symptoms are better. The child may be aggravated by heat. So I ask a lot of questions about how this child is presenting with this ear infection. And I may give that child a homeopathic remedy called, let's say, pulsatilla, as opposed to another child who has the same type of ear infection, but who presents with irritability and anger, and he's whimsical. And maybe I notice that one cheek is pale and the other cheek is red. And I noticed certain things about his thirst and other signs and symptoms, which would point me to another remedy like, let's say, chamomilla. And the purpose of the homeopathic remedy is to actually stimulate that child's immune system to overcome the ear infection. Okay. So because symptoms represent the best efforts of the body in its defense against infection or stress, homeopathy utilizes medicines that help mimic these defenses rather than inhibit or suppress them as allopathic treatments do. So in other words, the idea is that the body is innately intelligent, and we're trying to find the right remedy that acts as a catalyst to stimulate the immune system, is essentially what we're doing. Classical homeopathy is the practice of one remedy prescription at a time. This is just one of the books that Samuel Hahnemann wrote. This is a monument actually to Samuel Hahnemann that is in Washington, D.C., and it's one of the most beautiful monuments actually in the world. Many countries have monuments to Hahnemann because homeopathy was practiced in Europe in the 1800s, etc., in India. This is the unveiling of the monument of Hahnemann in 1900. Constantine Hering, many physicians came to homeopathy when they had diseases themselves or their families, and they were cured by homeopathic medicine. So Hering is considered the father of American homeopathy, and he had a dissecting wound in his hand that became inflamed and infected. He was advised to have his hand amputated in those days. This was way before antibiotics, and he sought homeopathic treatment and recovered. And he became one of the most influential proponents of homeopathy. And Hering established one of the first homeopathic medical schools in this country, in Pennsylvania. This is a photo of Hering. Hering also published one of the first domestic medical manuals called The Domestic Physician, which was published in 1835. And it was sold with a kit of homeopathic remedies known as the box and the book. And it was an acute care advice for the home prescriber. And this is just a picture of the remedies that we used back then. The kit was used by midwives, by nurses, and domestically by many women, actually, who were treating their families and communities for many of the acute infectious diseases at that time, such as measles, mumps, yellow fever, cholera, etc. In fact, women played a major role in spreading homeopathy's popularity in the 19th century. One homeopathic doctor asserted at a meeting of the American Institute of Homeopathy in 1869, many a woman armed with her little stack of remedies had converted an entire community to homeopathy. Homeopathy was extremely effective at treating the acute infectious diseases at that time. The American Institute of Homeopathy was established in 1844. It is still in existence, and it is the oldest national physicians organization in the United States. The American Medical Association was established 3 years later, partially in response to the threat that homeopathic physicians were posing because they were so successful treating the acute infectious diseases at that time. Unfortunately, the AMA started a real campaign against homeopathic physicians. Any doctor associated with a homeopath, even through marriage, was not permitted to be a member and frowned upon as a physician. And the New York Times editorial actually in 1881 stated, quote, "The AMA says that if a patient's life cannot be saved except by such a consultation with a homeopath, then the patient must die, and no doctor who will allow a homeopathic physician to help him can be recognized by the association." And this was the start of the downfall of homeopathy in the 1800s. At that time, there were about 22 homeopathic medical schools and about 100 homeopathic hospitals in this country. In fact, death rates in homeopathic hospitals were commonly 1/2 or even 1/8 of the death rates in conventional hospitals. And there's a wonderful book called The Divided Legacy by Harris Coulter that explains all of this, if you're interested. The Flexner Report was the final death knell for homeopathy. That was a report in 1910 that was a survey of American medical schools done by Abraham Flexner, who was hired by the Carnegie Foundation. And it set certain standards for medical schools that were biased in favor of allopathic medicine. Therefore, all medical schools teaching homeopathy were forced to change their curriculum to follow Flexner guidelines, which required a biomedical and allopathic model. As a result, all women's medical colleges which taught homeopathic medicine were closed. This included the very first women's medical college in the United States, which was the New England Female Medical College. And this significantly decreased the amount of homeopathic training. And basically by 1950, all homeopathic medical schools and hospitals were closed. And then around the 1970s, a bunch of physicians in this country went to Greece to study with George Fathulkas, who's one of the greatest homeopaths in the world, and brought homeopathy back to this country and taught a lot of us homeopathic, us physicians in those days. And there's been just a resurgence of homeopathy for many years now in this country. So I'm going to talk a little about homeopathic provings. Critical to the successful application of the law of similars was developing a method for testing potential homeopathic remedies. Homeopathic remedies are made from nature, basically made from plants, minerals, sometimes animal substances, but they're basically made from anything in nature can be used as a homeopathic medicine if prepared in the proper way. Hahnemann called these experiments provings, from the German prüfen, to try out or test, and his test subjects provers. And he conducted about 123 provings before he died. So Hahnemann sought to acquire knowledge of medicinal substances by systematically administering them to healthy humans. So unlike drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, which are sometimes tested in animals, we only give homeopathic remedies when we try to see what their symptom picture is in healthy people, because homeopathy treats the mental, emotional, and physical picture of the patient. And we can't gather mental, emotional symptoms from animals. Anyway. Provings are homeopathy's drug trials. They're the science behind homeopathic medicine. So for over 200 years now, hundreds of thousands of homeopaths throughout the world have carefully categorized the idiosyncratic physical, emotional, and mental symptoms that thousands of substances have caused in healthy people. And we've created the most extensive body of toxicological information available today. And all these symptoms from all these different provings are gathered in books called Materia Medicas. And over time, these included clinical symptoms, symptoms that have been cured by remedies in clinical settings, as well as information about symptoms produced by accidental poisonings in those days, such as arsenic, mercury, etc. And the provings, clinical and toxicological data from the Materia Medica of the remedy. I'm sorry, hang on, let me change this. So a listing of symptoms and those substances that have been found to cure each symptom are found in our repertory. So if I have a patient who has, let's say, frontal head pain worse in the morning, I will look up head pain, frontal, and it shows all the different symptoms: worse in the morning, worse in the afternoon, worse in the evening, showing all the remedies that could potentially cure that symptom. And a repertory and a Materia Medica complement each other, and these are the reference books that are essential in homeopathic practice. So how do we prepare homeopathic remedies? We prepare them through a process called potentization, which involves dilution of the substance and succussion. Hahnemann found that the more that a substance is diluted and succussed, the greater the therapeutic effect, while simultaneously nullifying the toxic effect if it's in fact a toxic substance, for example. Less is more. This is known as the law of infinitesimals. So we use, I'm going to skip over some of these. We tend to use the 1 in 100 scale here in the United States. A lot of us use this. We take 1 drop of source material, is diluted in 99 parts of water and alcohol to make 1 in 100, or a 1C solution. That is succussed, meaning there are machines that we use nowadays that prepare homeopathic remedies. In those days, in the old days, they used to take the remedy and pound it against a book. The succussion is a very important part of the homeopathic remedy process of making homeopathic remedies. So then we take 1 drop of this solution and then place it in 99 parts of water and alcohol, and then we get a 2C solution, and we go on and on and on. 30C is diluted and succussed 30 times. The 30C is usually what you can find in the health food stores, especially Boiron, the blue tubes we call them. Usually they're 30C potencies. The Homeopathic Pharmacopoeia of the United States is the official compendium for homeopathic drugs in the United States, or remedies. It sets forth the pharmaceutical standards, tests, and methods for the manufacture of homeopathic products. It was officially established under the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act of 1938 by Dr. Copeland, who was a homeopathic physician and a United States Senator from New York. We now know that homeopathy is actually a form of nanomedicine, because for years we were trying to understand exactly how homeopathy works, because these are very diluted substances, and yet they're very powerful and very effective. And nanomedicine is kind of a complicated process, but I'll just briefly say that the manual succussions, the pounding of the preparations of homeopathic remedies, are a very important part of this process. Manual succussions during preparations of medicines, homeopathic medicines, introduce intense turbulence, particle collisions, and shear forces into the solution that break off smaller and smaller particles of the remedy source material. These are called nanoparticles, okay? As well as silica fragments from the walls of the glass containers that we're using to prepare remedies. And the nanosilica, in fact, may serve as a biological amplifier for that homeopathic signal that is retained no matter how much we dilute and we succuss the remedy. Nanoparticles are different from bulk form materials such as pharmaceuticals as a function of their tiny small size, including their electromagnetic, optical, thermal, and quantum properties. And there's loads of studies on this showing how even medicine is now moving towards using nanomedicine or nanoparticles in many different types of industries, because nanoparticles lower the doses of a drug, herb, nutraceutical, or antigen needed to produce clinical effects in medicine by orders of magnitude. And this is a graph just showing that a specific pharmaceutical drug has a specific receptor interaction that creates local effects, whereas the homeopathic medicine on the left triggers a response by the entire body, by the central nervous system, the immune system, etc. It's kind of an adaptive response to that homeopathic signal or medicine. This is just showing that nanoparticles or nanomedicine is being used in many different industries, such as healthcare, biomedical, textiles, and industry. This is just a picture of a photo of a homeopathic remedy that people can get at many health food stores. Boiron is one of the leading manufacturers of homeopathic medicines, and they are from France. There's also Hahnemann Labs in California, Washington Homeopathic Products. There's a number of pharmacies that make homeopathic remedies. I'm just going to go through the science very quickly, just to say we have a large evidence base of homeopathy from clinical provings, case reports, clinical trials, etc. I'm just briefly give you an example. This was an in vitro in the test tube study done at MD Anderson Cancer Center, showing that homeopathic medicines were able to kill certain breast cancer cell lines in vitro. We have a lot of these studies, a lot of clinical trials. This was one this was an excellent study that was published in Pediatrics in 1994 of childhood diarrhea. This was a randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial of 81 children in Nicaragua who were given individualized homeopathic remedies for childhood diarrhea, and the and showed significantly decreased duration of diarrhea and decrease in the number of stools per day. This is showing that plastic surgeons now are actually using arnica, which is a fantastic homeopathic medicine for trauma, to reduce the healing time after rhinoplasties, after liposuction, and other types of surgeries. I'm going to skip through this. This was a very large study in France of general practitioners using homeopathy, showing that homeopathy was extremely effective for musculoskeletal disease, sleep anxiety and depression, and upper respiratory tract infections. You can go to the website homeopathyyusa.org, which is the Homeopathic Institute of the American Institute of Homeopathy, which is where all of us homeopathic practitioners, you can find a list and lots of articles and studies and videos. Homeopathy has a 200-year safety record, which has been proven time and time again. And I'm just showing you some basic remedies that we have. I mentioned arnica. Aconite is an amazing remedy for panic attacks and complaints that come on after a fright or shocking event. There's arsenicum album, which is a very big remedy for food poisoning, and many other states. And Nux vomica, you can also find in the health food store, which is considered a very big hangover remedy, but it's also used for many other states as well. Oh, sorry, I think that's it. I think I got through that all. Okay, I think I managed to do that in a fair amount of time. No, kept it. So, questions? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Oh, what happened? Okay. So I'd like to take some questions now from the audience.
Yep.
If anyone-
Jessica, you want to unmute yourself?
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I wonder if you could show that slide you had about the breast cancer, and I'd like to just note down the references you had on that slide.
Sure, if I can, okay, go back to the slides now, which was a problem initially.
It was near the end. It was near the end.
Right, I know. I'm just trying to, okay, let me see if I can get back. Hang on.
You should be able to go to share and it
Yep,
should
more. I
be
see
there.
it. And then, oh, I know the share's right here. Okay. Ah, good. This time it came up. Okay. Let me see where that was. Let me just put it on play. No, play. No, I'm not getting play. Hang on. I'm just gonna go up here. Where was that slide? Here. Yes, that was in the International Journal of Oncology. And now this was an in vitro study. This was in test tube study. That was in the International Journal of Oncology, 36, 2010. Pages 395 to 340 to, no, must be 443.
I mean, MD Anderson is a very reputable cancer center, so I'd love to read what they published.
Yes, no problem.
And I really enjoyed your presentation. I was very thorough about the history of homeopathy, and I really appreciated that perspective.
Oh, thank you. I know people don't often know about the history. That's why I wanted to emphasize that, because homeopathy was really the United States was the center of homeopathy in the world back then, even though it started in Europe. But a lot of the Europeans came over and practiced it here, and it was really quite popular, especially in treating a lot of the acute infectious diseases at the time. Which, by the way, homeopathy was very effective during COVID. I treated at least 180 to 200 cases of acute COVID very successfully with homeopathy. just like we had success during the Spanish flu pandemic in 1918. And we actually used similar remedies to then, because the basic laws of homeopathy have not changed in 200 years.
That
So
Wexner report did a lot of damage to homeopathy, and the whole politics around that ensued. It was terrible. And
it was terrible. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It shut down homeopathy in this country. It was, yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Yes, Suzanne, it's Andrea Candy. Hi, it's nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, Andrew. It's been a long time.
Been a long time. So I was very interested in that you were going to be speaking about this, and I understand you will next time as it relates to dementia. So am I understanding correctly that if a person has dementia, first of all, it would depend upon the level
Yes.
that which remedy they would need. There would be other mitigating circumstances. There isn't a remedy for.
Exactly. Everyone's different the way they present with whatever disease they have.
Uh-huh.
So where homeopathy is especially effective is in the behavioral changes that occur with dementia as well. I have found that to be, so sometimes people, when they get dementia, they can even become violent. It depends on the person. Homeopathy can be very effective for that. When it comes to the actual cognitive impairment, I use homeopathy as well as functional medicine, nutrition, detoxification, many other things. So it's, depending on how severe the dementia is, it's really a multifaceted approach. But
So I have a client whose wife went into dementia and now she is in a nursing home. Have you ever worked with someone who's that far ahead, far along? She's only about 60. It's early dementia.
Wow, that's early dementia. Yes,
Yeah.
that's unfortunate. Yeah, the hard thing I find with advanced dementia is that you really need to work on nutrition, which is very difficult because often the children are taking, the children, which are adults, are taking care of their parents. They're so overwhelmed by it. And to have them make these changes is very difficult. You have to have a family that's willing to make nutritional changes. There are many blood tests that I order that I'd like to get. There are supplements they need to take. Incorporating some exercise into the program. It's really a multifaceted approach, and it's very difficult and stressful for families.
Yeah.
And this is one of the problems I have
Yeah.
found.
Yes,
So I
yes, I agree.
if I can get them early, earlier in the dementia, and if they have support around them and they're willing to make these changes, there's much more success with it. So it really involves the family, and it's that kind of approach that's needed.
Yeah, this is a husband who is very open to alternatives, and I wish he had reached out sooner. He is on now dialysis.
Oh dear.
So
So
do
that,
you ever work with patients who are on dialysis and be able to improve things?
I haven't worked with too many people on dialysis, frankly. Some, I do a lot of work with type 2 diabetics. And you can reverse type 2 diabetes if you get in there early enough and you change the diet, etc. And homeopathy can help as well. Um, it depends. I mean, he's on dialysis. What else? Why is he on dialysis? Why the
I
kids
don't know. It happened very suddenly.
Oh,
He,
that's interesting. Well,
yeah,
it depends on the reason. I'm not sure. I mean, usually
right.
when I see patients with dialysis, it's because of type 2 diabetes that just progressed,
Yeah,
basically.
no, that was not his case. I'm so trying to get this family some help.
Mm.
But I'm interested in your next talk to see how you use the homeopathy with different stages of dementia. Yeah, great. I'm so glad you're doing this work, Suzanne. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question about allergies.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter is allergic to latex. And we're quite sure it was exposure to poorly made product back in 1996 when she was born. She
Mhm.
had jaundice. So she was in a, you know, that little thing for bilirubin, whatever. And they had latex gloves on, constantly. Then she went to daycare, and they changed diapers with latex gloves on.
Mhm.
So she was, unbeknownst to me. So it was maybe about when she was about 4 that we figured out she was allergic to latex. So she's always avoided it. And I'm just curious as to whether that's the type of allergy that could be treated by homeopathy.
I don't know, frankly. I mean, the allergies that I treat are more, seasonal allergies, things
Okay.
like that. I haven't
Mhm.
treated too many latex allergies.
Okay.
Um, but my thought is that some of these allergies, there's a lot of toxins in the environment that make a lot of these allergies worse.
Hmm.
So sometimes I'll do, check the urine for certain toxins. I mean, it's amazing how many people have pesticides in their system and mycotoxins and heavy metals. It's incredible. And, you know, sometimes I wonder if, just if we can detoxify and remove some of these toxins, which we can do with natural substances, et cetera, if it would possibly improve some of these other allergies, such as the latex allergies. I don't know if that's the case. I haven't treated too many latex allergies, but it's one of the things I think about, with this question.
And Jessica asks, in choosing a homeopath, how would one choose between classical and clinical homeopath?
Well, it's a good question. So clinical homeopathy involves using many different remedies at once, and there are homeopaths that have successfully treated people doing that method. I prefer doing the original method that Hahnemann promoted, which was using one remedy at a time, because when we do the provings in homeopathy, which is the science behind it, we're only testing one remedy at a time in healthy individuals. Okay, we don't do provings. We haven't done provings on several remedies at once. It would be too complicated. So I choose to practice classical homeopathy, which is using one remedy at a time. But there are clinical homeopaths that use several remedies and also have success.
Mhm. Interesting.
Yeah.
It reminds me of my daughter's first, her 1 year checkup.
Mhm.
She had eggs for breakfast, peanut butter for lunch, and shrimp for dinner. And her appointment was the next day, and I told the pediatrician that she didn't have any reaction to any of those things, that he wasn't letting me feed her. And he simply said, not all on the same day. I'm like, oh, well, I didn't know that.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I was an older mother, so I didn't know anything.
Right, of course.
Uh, any other questions? I'm looking in the chat. I don't think so.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sal. Oh, how about food allergies?
Food allergies, usually that's more the functional medicine piece of my practice where I do an elimination diet, which I do in many people. I have many people do that, where they remove certain foods that we know are a problem for the gut, such as gluten, dairy, corn, soy, and eggs. You usually remove them for a few weeks, and then often many symptoms will improve, and then you introduce one back at a time to see which foods are causing the reaction. You have to wait 2 days in between the introduction of each food, because it can
Mhm.
take up to 2 days later to have a reaction to a food that you're sensitive to. But and usually people don't necessarily have to avoid the food completely. They may be able to have it once a week or twice a week, as long as it doesn't accumulate. But if you heal the gut properly, which is one of the things I do in functional medicine, often people can start to have some of the food again without it causing such a problem. They may not, be able to have it every day, but they may be able to have it twice a week or something like that. but finding out what food you're sensitive to is often key. And
Mhm.
then working on the gut is also very important. That's the functional medicine piece of my practice.
And I have known people who maybe can't eat raw apples, but they can eat baked apple, like in apple pie.
Yeah, that's certain food sensitivities that people have.
Yeah.
That's not uncommon.
Interesting. Okay.
And who knows, we might be having more food sensitivities because of environmental toxins, like I've often had patients who say they can go to Italy and have gluten there and wheat and it's not a problem, but when they come here, they have a problem. And it may be all the glyphosate and the pesticides that are sprayed on the wheat crops, and maybe that's causing a problem for the gut, besides gluten itself, it's
Right.
complicated.
And the differences between processing food in one country as opposed to another.
Exactly.
And I'm sure climate change will affect food allergies as well. Okay,
Any other questions?
I think that.
Okay,
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Saltzman. This was wonderful.
very welcome. And thank you everyone for attending, and we'll see you again in the future, okay?
Definitely. I'm going to stop our recording.
Okay.